Valentino, she had the song Looking for Love. And since we had a singing group in high school, we started changing that. We sang that song and won a couple of talent shows, but then we started singing the song Looking for a Groove. So it was important every Friday after we did our scholastic stuff, we were starting groove, but we would be sitting there looking for a groove, and every Friday we would check to see that meant you had a nice young lady for the weekend. So we'd ask you, you got a groove? So one Friday, none of us had a groove for that particular Friday, so we marched around the campus singing, I'm looking for a groove, and we marched through the library. And then they reported us to the dean, and he called us in because he dissatisfied with our behavior. And then we wouldn't speak up and say who was involved until he said he was going to give us a one-way ticket back home, and we could never go on that campus again. So he gave the name, and then we started getting more serious about meeting, because you got to remember, we weren't quite on campus then. But because we were moving around together in unison and getting some things accomplished, we drew the attention of the Penn Atlantic Council, which is the governing body, student activity. So they got to the point where every time we turned around, they were kind of governing us, telling us what we could do, what we couldn't do. And they figured because we had the Phi in their name, that they had a right to kind of govern us, even though we weren't legitimately on campus yet. And President Martin Jenkins, it was during the Civil Rights era. So the fact that he could get the Penn Atlantic Council to kind of monitor us, right, that wasn't a thorn in his foot. He could keep on with the education process. So then finally, we said, well, why is the Penn Atlantic Council telling us what to do every moment? We're not free. So they said, you got G5G in your name. As long as you got that Phi, you're going to come under us. And we said the Phi that we're talking about is not the Greek letter Phi, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, Phi, Chi, Psi, Omega, not that Phi. We were the Egyptian symbol Phi, the chemists and all that from the history. So then the president or the administration said, because you're not Greek, you no longer have to be governed by the Penn Atlantic Council. But I can't let you continue on my campus without coming under some governing body. And that made sense. So Miss Alice Parham, who became director of the Student Union in 1958, she was a Charter Delta member, graduated from Morgan in 1928. She was a basketball star. Charles Drew was a coach for women's basketball at Morgan before he went on to excel in the healthcare field and the medical field. Charles Drew, remember that name, drug plasma and all that, right? So because in addition to academics, which is why you go to school, right, we were starting to strengthen the social element. In addition, and all the founders graduated, so we met the scholastic goal, and some had 3.5s and all, we met that. But in the student union, where Alice Parham had become director in 58, and we were coming in 60 and all, before that, she had a job as running recreation and parks somewhere in Baltimore City. So her mindset was that of developing the minds of young black men and women, instead of children to be seen and not heard. Don't go where you're not wanted. Don't bite off. Do it because I said so. She was more like questioning and giving us a chance to start talking about at our age. Remember, she graduated in 28, right? And because I was in a singing group with Ray Clark and a couple of founders, we used to have talent shows. They had a little stage. So we would pack the student union, which she felt was good because that was her job. When you wanted academics, you could come to the student union building. And then we came up with the idea of card tournaments, every kind, dirty hearts, spades, pinochle, whist, all that. And we started having tournaments. and packing the student union before we were accepted on campus. So when Martin Jenkins said, we can't afford to allow you to continue on campus, she stepped up and said, I think I know what we can do with these young men, because she was aware of how we helped her cause and at the same time maintain her academics. So with the Greeks needing a 2.5 or 2.7, can't remember which, when they formed the CIO in '64, the requirements was to be in good standing with the university. So we weren't required to have the 2.5 or 2.7, and all the founders graduated. So now in that case, we met the minimum requirements under the CIO, and they would say, oh man, these dummies, these guys, I don't even know if they're gonna graduate, because a lot of them had to what, 2.5, 2.7, and your parents had to be a doctor, a lawyer, you know, all that stuff. Our thing was, if you breathe on a mirror and it fogs up and you're in good standing with the school, let's go. We're not gonna ask you, is your father this or not working? We're talking about you right here and now on campus, right? And trying to graduate. Let's move on and get some things done. So when we started with that, when we was partying, when we created CIO, right? When we had our first line in the fall of '63, just before that, the Iota Phi Thetas, which was all Greek, started in '63 on Morgan's campus. So we had started before them, and most of them were from Baltimore, but they chose to go into the Penn Atlantic Council. And I think there might have been a fee associated with that, if I remember correctly, which means for the fee, you got a lot of services from the council on helping you to move forward. Since we were non-Greek, and the CIO didn't have quite those services then, we just had to keep getting knocked down, getting up, getting knocked down, getting up again. So now moving forward now, when you talk about after around '63 when we had our first line, we started gaining momentum.
I'm sorry.
We'll just be a second.
No, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure. I'm so sorry. I got the family here. Thank you.
Okay.
So
we started getting momentum, and then I had a homeboy in Passaic, New Jersey, Reginald Carney. He was awesome, brother. Jiu-jitsu, all that stuff, and black belt. And we were up in Jersey one summer, and he was talking about running for president of the Student Government Party. And normally that job was held by some Greeks because they already had this structure in place to support them. So we told him then, we think we can help you with the student government president, but you got to do more to continue to help us with our journey. And he did exactly that. We helped him get in. He was student government president, and he did the things to help us get traction, including when the different student government presidents met. He informed them what was taking place on Morgan's campus with the newly formed CIO and what to expect at different colleges. Okay? So when we changed the name, Looking for a Love, Looking for a Groove, as Martin Luther King said, we didn't stop there. We had the song, Go Tell It on the Mountain, over the hill, everywhere, Go Tell It on the Mountain, Groove Phi Groove is here. Then we were off and running, Lincoln and Cheney in Pennsylvania, Dale State, Dover. Maryland had 5 HBUs. If you went a couple hundred miles west on Route 70, that was Route 40 then, you were in Ohio. Central State, Wilberforce and Xenia. When you drop down a little southeast a little bit, West Virginia Yellow Jackets. When you left there, came down Howard, Bison. Then we took 95, I guess the interstate might have been completed then. Now you hit Virginia, 5 HBCUs, North Carolina, 10, South Carolina, 4. But when we got to South Carolina and South Carolina State, there was a hole in the fence that went to Clapton. For some reason, we didn't venture there. I don't know what it was about. We didn't think they really wanted us to come in there and start some things. And then from there, it was Tennessee State, Nashville. Then when you come east across Crossville, you get to Knoxville State, which was in the eastern part, time zone change of Tennessee. Then we went on down south, And then we picked up Atlanta, Morehouse, Clark, Morristown, Morris Brown. And then we went back west across the time zone again and picked up Tuskegee. Now we're going to Louisiana, which was Grambling. We didn't get down to Baton Rouge with Southern at that time for some reason. But we went on up to Shreveport, which is Route 20 coming out of Dallas into Shreveport, and got Grambling rolling. And then when we went there, we went down to Texas Southern, Houston, and then down to Prairie View. Okay, so that's the route we took. And then somewhere along the line, we started picking up non-HBCUs, MIT, Harvard, Yale, University of Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech. Some of them got caught up in a movement because at a time they was letting African American males go to non-HBCU schools. So we started picking them up. Now they like the idea that we weren't too much into hazing as it was done 3 weeks in the spring, and then you come back in the summer and do 5 or 6 weeks, and then 1 week hell week. And during that time, that's exactly what it was. So we decided to change that and not be overly aggressive around the paddle and all that, our first line. So then in 65 or 6, Earl Monroe came out of Winston-Salem and they took him over at North Carolina Central because that was our third school we were established. Earl was getting ready to come to the Bullets in Baltimore, then him and Winston-Salem. And he believed in keeping your mind educated and physically educated, or physically in tune, sit-ups, running, keeping stuff like that. So we wanted him to be an RD, but because he traveled so much, right, he didn't have the time. But when they saw him come and you had a pledge line, can you imagine a fat guy overweight and knowing Earl was coming on, make him do 220 push-ups and run around the track 3 or 4 times? Some of them said, look man, I'd rather take the paddle and do all this stuff he's trying to make us do. But anyway, we tried our best not to do that, because when William and Mary was founded in 18-something in Virginia, it was from the Greeks observing the Egyptians who were going through all kinds of stuff then. But every time they did everything they could in Africa, slavery and all, when the smoke cleared, they were more bonded. And they kept moving on. So they figured, man, if we do this to the blacks and they can keep being bonded and move on, maybe we can start an organization in Virginia and basically subject these young people, non-black, right, to some of these things, you know, have color in your face, in line, all that stuff, and maybe we can grow some young non-black men to be bonded like we did that. So that was the thing. Now, in early 1900s, Cornell, Ithaca, Alpha Phi Alpha came in, and they were chartered there. A couple of them, I think, had tried to get in the organization already on Cornell's campus, but because of color, they were denied. Okay, and a couple of them then were so fair-skinned, you almost didn't know if they were black or white. But the campus knew. The next year, they came to Howard. And this is what we heard back from Alice Parham, who graduated in 28, and we used to practice in the student union again, because we had a singing group. She would just sit down and talk to them. So she was telling us all this. So when they went to Howard, and they didn't charter at Howard, they chartered at Cornell, the Alpha. When they went to Howard, what we heard then, right, was that the first line they took over, they held up a brown paper bag. And if you were darker than the brown paper bag, it was less likely, this is what we heard now, it was less likely you were going to get into the Alpha. And we asked Ms. Parham then, who was a charter in 28, so she was around a little bit of that history. So why would they do this? And she said, you gotta understand, Barry, if this was 2004, 5, 6, or 7, whatever it was, you might Google and get a different date. So I don't have it in writing here with me. She said, you have to understand when these gentlemen at Howard, age 20, 21, 22 or whatever, 18, 19, in 1904, 5 or 6, they were born in 1884, 5, 6, 7, or depending if they went in service, came, all that. You have to understand more about how they were raised, their level of awareness, and why they did the things they did. Because back then, if you were light-skinned, you could learn to read, you could go to kitchen, you could meet people and all that. And if you were my color, you kind of had to be laid back a little. So they took their value system, without thinking about it, into Howard. And she said, when you understand that, you're gonna understand why they did what they did with the brown paper bag and never thought nothing about it, right? And then when you think of it on the other line, there weren't that many African Americans really going to college then, so they were special. They were in college, and half the world of color weren't. That was new then. I'm talking about before the 50s and 60s. So they thought they were what? They were correct. So Ms. Parham helped us just understand why they did what they did. And then later on, like 1909 or 10 again, AKA chartered at Howard. The first line they had, they said, were philosophical difference, but it was color. So now we learn, if you Google, 1 or 2, or maybe 3 of the charter members at Delta Sigma Theta were AKA founders. So all that was mixed up then, okay? So now when we finally got chartered in 62 in the fall, right, we had a meeting. That's why we picked October 12th, 1962, with the 14 of us, because we had a meeting, and there was about 20-some people there, and we had done something good, so they were all there owning all the success. Yeah, I was there, brother, and all. Then we had another meeting with about 20-some, and we weren't doing well. So Ray Clark, some of the older ones, said, look, everybody wants to be on a wagon going downhill. And right now, we're kind of like struggling. So we're going to draw a line right now, and for those of you who want to move on, which are the 14 of us, let's go. Jimmy Hill was elected president, or the rest of you, you can leave the run because you're not one step across the line. So as some of them were leaving, they were still chuckling and smearing a little bit, because at that time it still was unknown whether we were going to either succeed. So as they were leaving the door before we locked it, man, them cats, I don't know what they're going to do. They ain't going to make it. I don't know why I came to this meeting anyway. After they left and they found out we closed the door and held a meeting inside to elect officers, Jimmy Hill, president, David, how the mayor and the land and all that stuff, he wasn't that hands-on. Now, I'm not faulting him, but because of that behavior. So anyway, and that was 20-some years later, from 61 institutional, right? So from 62 to 69, Linwood Harris came along from A&T and recommended that we have a national president. The only reason we listened to him, because he was older, he'd been in the service, so he was around our age. He went to Overbrook in Philadelphia, okay? So he was, we listened to him, and we finally agreed that we did need some structure in place to start what? Facilitating our growth and our changes for the future. And I'm so glad he came along, then Roy Sutherland, then Eugene Clay, who was at Morgan when we were there, upper class, but then he didn't pledge until 66 in Jersey under Ray Clark, who started the grad chapter. Ray Clark was born in 37. This guy, Eugene Clay, was born, I think, in 38. And when they took that line over in 66 or 7, the night they took it over, they went to the Q boat ride in New York. And they took the line over right there, and so when all these Jews were coming off the boat at night after the boat ride, over here was, I forgot how many grooves that had just pledged with the little candles and stuff and pow with the Groove Phi Groove stuff on. Now who would think of that? Ray Clark. See how he did that. So now we were talking about the grad chapter thing, and because when we started in '62, the skill requirement for starting something and growing it isn't the same as people who join your organization because they think you're great. And then, but after they graduate, there was no grad chapter until Ray Clark. So we thought they should do like we did, start a grad chapter, grow it, and move forward. But when they pledged because of something they liked about something we created. That was the reason, not starting something that you wasn't there and watching it grow into something. So we can't blame them for 62 to 69. We were pledging 100 here, 200, etc., and quite a bit. And so we had to get back into that grad chapter stuff to try to find out how to get them to start creating more grad chapters. And Ray Clark started that kind of movement, and then others kind of followed. We started one in Baltimore right after I graduated, and then some of the guys went back home because they weren't from Baltimore, so that broke that up, right? So, make a long story short, I don't know how much time you have, Dr. Dupree.
Yeah, time to writing it down a little bit.
Okay.
Barry, this
right. So what is it that you want to know anymore?
Okay, just real quick, if you don't mind. When you started traveling from colleges to colleges, okay. So can you kind of remember? I know you said it quickly, but do you mind just slowing up? So the first after Morgan, you went where?
Okay, after Morgan, we picked the Norfolk. When they allowed me to pick 3 or 4 schools, so the best of them could give money to them.
Right.
I picked Morgan. That's where I came from. Right. After a year ago, after that, they said, "Well, Morgan doesn't have an engineering program. They do now.
Right.
They didn't then." And they said at a steel plant like Baltimore, we had 1,500 mechanical, 1,500 electrical, so we need that. We were doing Norfolk State.
Right.
Harrison Wilson was the president, and his grandson, Russell.
So I'm saying, I'm just looking at our first chapter was Morgan.
Yeah.
Our second chapter was
Delaware, State.
Right, Del. And after Delaware,
North Carolina Central.
North Carolina Central.
And then I kind of lost track. Yeah, Jordan.
Okay.
Right.
So then Norfolk came kind of, I didn't know how, did you guys do one sweep, you know what I mean? Or it was
well, okay, but see, that was in the 70s by the time we started giving money to those schools.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
But back in 63, when Del State got involved,
right.
Tyrone Seymour was the basketball star.
Right.
And he came and played the Hall at Morgan, and he asked, what is all this groove stuff?
Right.
And the following week, because you played at school twice, they came to your area.
Oh, so he came as a basketball player and saw you at Morgan.
No, he was playing at Delaware State,
but
and they beat us.
Right.
He had about 30-some points. And then after the game, he cornered us and said, what's all this groove stuff? So a couple of weeks later, when we played Del State, we went up there. And he said, we'd like to do something like this on our campus. In the meantime, our first line had a guy, Barry Cornell, whose half brother was Murphy Reynolds, who became a charter member in North Carolina Central. So then we got involved with that third. After that now, I kind of lost track about the different schools then. Bowie, Union, some of them, it was moving so fast then.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And we got the right from Reginald Palmy, who was student government president, to get student government presidents of the HBUs to be prepared to accept us and understand we were not panel on the council and we were CIO.
Right.
So that tended for them to be less resistant to us, even though the schools we went to, they were still pretty resistant.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So from then, it just, Moose who was here, A&T went down to Tuskegee, Wimbo, who was at Howard, went to Ohio to start Wilberforce, and the guys started branching out because they liked the concept, because we weren't overly beating up on people and all. You know what I mean? So that they liked the concept and all. And I think that's how we grew. Now, when you talk about finally the grade point average, if you did a study right now, you find out greater than 30% of every group that plays had higher than a 2.5 anyway.
Right.
They just were not interested in these other organizations. Although the requirement was in good standing, 2.0.
Right.
And all the founders graduated. So that ends that, and a lot of people like to focus on something different. So just final, a couple of years ago, with some influence by Andre Dupree and others, they named the headquarters building after us on Maryland Avenue.
Yes.
So every now and then I get in my car and put on some music and go sit in front of the building and mellow in my worthwhile. Don't need no liquor, don't need nothing. Just sit there for an hour. But then when you leave there, you're this high.
Yeah.
And by the time you stop at the 7-Eleven or stop to pick up bread or stop at Walmart, get gas, you run into somebody who didn't have a good experience with Groove and start talking about their negative experiences. And by the time you get home, your feet are back on the ground, you know what I mean? But then you got used to it after a while.
Right.
So when I get home this weekend, I think I may stop by there Tuesday, weather permitting, and just sit out front. The classical music means that's not the focus. It's just background while you're mellowing.
Right.
As opposed to turning one of the latest hits.
Right.
And you go, oh man, I like that.
No.
Yeah.
No.
We don't need some of that. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So that's good.
That's good.
But for the guys like Andre that came along after us to keep the torch lit, is to me just as critical as the fact that we were able to light it.
Yeah,
Because if it didn't keep it lit, we wouldn't be sitting here today.
thank you.
So I always say, finally, the founders say, we've come this far by faith. Thank you. The founders say, thank you. And that's it. And Andre, I appreciate you wanting to take the time to sit here and do this.
Yeah.
And you're the one used to tell me about Jimmy Hill and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And welcome is the new RD for the South Atlantic region, isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank
The
you.
founders were backing you.
Thank
We
you.
just had a question about the process.
Yes, I got you.
Okay, understand that. John Hurd and all them, they thought you, it wasn't that